Hello and welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight is about a new twist in the Russia-Ukraine war, a rather dangerous turn which could have far-reaching consequences, deadly ones. As Russian nukes reach Belarus, is Russia preparing to use its nuclear warheads? And what really should one make of the timing of this move? Is the Ukraine war set to take a nuclear turn? On Gravitas tonight, we tell you all about how and why the fears of a nuclear war are escalating. Also on the show for you tonight, the Wuhan virus makes a comeback in China. We tell you why this is a cause of concern. We also take you back years ago to when the plot to kill Queen Elizabeth was being talked about. That is a special story coming up for you. Elon Musk's brain chip plans get the go-ahead, but what really lies in store and what are the risks and opportunities that lie ahead? Forbidden zones in Ladakh will soon welcome tourists. We tell you all about the forbidden zones and why this move is significant. Russia has raised the threshold to nuclear as America, the NATO and European allies send fresh supplies for Ukraine's much-awaited spring offensive, and the war escalates dangerously across land, sea and air. Moscow has raised its response level to the ultimate dread, a nuclear war. Is Russia preparing to use its nuclear warheads? The Kremlin is moving its nuclear warheads. Russian nukes have reached Belarus. The Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, has confirmed the deployment. The movement has already begun, he says. Now, is this the countdown to what we have been fearing all this while? Is the Ukraine war all set to take a nuclear turn? Because it's hard to ignore or water down the developments, for this is the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union that Russia is deploying nukes outside the country. This move is equal parts significant and scary. Russia, remember, has more nuclear weapons than any other country. We are looking at some 5,977 warheads. Estimates say around 1,500 of these warheads are retired. A little over 2,800 are in reserve, and some 1,500 are deployed in strategic locations. In fact, many of Russia's nuclear weapons range from about 10 to 100 kilotons. There are also many above 100 kilotons. And just to give you a point of reference here, the bomb dropped in Hiroshima had around 0.3 kilotons of explosive force. Russian nukes are over 100 times deadlier. So where are these nukes positioned is the immediate question. It's hard to point it out on a map. What we do know, however, courtesy America's Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, is that Russia has deployed some 812 of its nuclear weapons on land-based ballistic missiles. Around 576 of the nuclear weapons are deployed on submarines. 300 are in heavy bomber bases. And where exactly are these submarines or bases? Well, unless you are a part of the team in charge of Russia's nuclear weapons, you will not know. Now, here's what analysts are pointing out. Positioning tactical weapons in Belarus puts all of Ukraine, Poland, the Baltic states and parts of Germany within Russia's nuclear range. The control of these weapons, however, remains with Russia. You see, Putin is the ultimate decision maker when it comes to Russia's nuclear warheads. He, and he alone, gets to press the nuclear button. This is the Cheget. It is Russia's nuclear briefcase. It is with the president all the time. Putin can send a nuclear launch order to General Staff Command and Reserve Command units via this briefcase. And Putin has, in fact, openly said that the Kremlin will use all means to defend itself. So what really are the chances that Russia will be using these weapons? The White House says it does not see any such signs. Listen in.
We've heard us say that before, nor any indications Russia is preparing to use nuclear weapons for Belarus.
But just how true is that? For the past year, numerous nuclear references have been made by both Russia and the US. In October 2022, in fact, US President Joe Biden was attending a Democratic Party fundraiser when he said that the world faces its biggest risk of an Armageddon. What is an Armageddon, you ask? It's a biblical reference to the last battle between good and evil. Basically, it means the end, a nuclear apocalypse. Biden's remark, if you may remember it, let me read it out anyway. When the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, to protect Russia and our people, we will certainly use all the means at our disposal. This is not a bluff. Remember how Biden replied? He said he knows Putin fairly well and that the Russian president was, quote unquote, not joking when he talks about the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. Now, following the deployment of nukes to Belarus, America has sent out a staunch warning to Russia. It said the new use of chemical, biological or nuclear weapons will be met with, quote unquote, severe consequences. So is America preparing for such an event? The US has 5,428 nuclear weapons. This is an estimate by ICAN, or International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And many of America's nukes are stationed abroad in NATO countries. The Netherlands, for example, hosts 20 US nuclear weapons. Turkey, for that matter, hosts 50. Italy, 40. And Belgium hosts anything between 10 to 15 American nukes. Same with Germany, by the way, anything between 10 to 15. Is America now planning to adjust nuclear postures? No, says the White House, adding that Russia's move is a quote-unquote example of making irresponsible and provocative choices. In fact, Russia says it is Western provocation that forced this deployment in the first place. Shifting focus now to what's happening in China. The country is battling a new COVID-19 wave. That's right. Just 3 months after infecting thousands, the Wuhan virus has now made a comeback in China. And if we believe the experts, the new outbreak may be the greatest wave of illness that the country has ever recorded. And this, of course, forced us to ask the obvious questions. Should the rest of us be worried? What really is going on? Let me just start off with the numbers. Beijing's health authorities say that COVID-19 cases in the city this week topped 25,000. They say that this is the largest number of weekly cases in recent months. In fact, the spike is so big that a Bloomberg report says the new wave could lead to 40 million weekly cases by the end of May and 65 million weekly cases by the end of June. I repeat, 65 million. It's a startling prediction, especially for China, where the pandemic originated in 2019, remember, and which only months ago had enforced some of the harshest COVID-19 protocols in the world. And now with the latest Omicron subvariant fueling a resurgence in the cases, China is expected to go back to square one. So which subvariant is behind this surge is the question? Well, there's not one variant this time. It's a concoction of mutations. The names of 3 of them stand out. XBB.1.91, XBB.1.9.1, XBB.1.5, XBB.1.16. And these 3 subvariants are driving the spike. So just how serious is this spike? Well, according to experts, the new wave will be less severe than the previous one, but public health experts believe that to avoid another surge in the mortality figures, especially among the elderly population of China, a vigorous booster program and a ready supply of antivirals in hospitals is essential. Let me just quote a statement from an expert at the University of Hong Kong School of Public Health. He says, and I'm quoting, "The number of infections will be less, the severe cases will certainly be less, and deaths will be less, but that could still be a large number. Even when we think this is a milder wave, it could still be quite a substantial health impact on the community." And then we have the Beijing Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It says the variations have increased the number of cases since last month, with COVID-19 surpassing flu as the most prevalent infectious disease, especially in the final 2 weeks of April. And besides Beijing, the situation is difficult to grasp in other parts of the country. And that is because China has stopped releasing domestic infection data after April. In fact, even restrictions similar to those that existed during the zero COVID era, when China tried to stop any illnesses, have not been reinstated yet. And the majority of citizens seem to be going about their daily lives as usual. What about vaccines? Well, China has new COVID-19 vaccines in the pipeline, which will specifically target XBB variants. The country's drug regulator has given preliminary approval to 2 vaccines so far. Remember, during China's first Omicron wave in December and January, a different Omicron variant was infecting millions of people every day. It overwhelmed the hospitals and crematoriums in cities across the country. Store shelves were emptied. As far as fever medications are concerned, schools were shut down. Some estimates say that about 80% of China's 1.4 billion people were infected during that wave. But immunity may have waned in the months since, raising the risk of reinfection. So just to put this simply, this wave may not really be severe, but it can still end up burdening the health authorities, and not to mention the fear that these cases may spill over, because if the last 4 years have taught us anything, it is this: what happens in China does not really stay in China. And for our next story, let me take you back in time to the year 1983. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were set to visit California. About a month ahead of the visit, a San Francisco officer received a call. It was from a man he had met at an Irish pub. And it was no ordinary call, by the way. The man revealed a devious plot. He was planning to assassinate Queen Elizabeth. You heard that right. The Queen faced an assassination threat. And what was this man aiming to do really? Why did he want to murder Queen Elizabeth? Did the US police get a hold of him? The FBI has revealed some intricate details relating to this. The man was actually seeking revenge. He wanted to avenge his daughter, who was killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. And what was his game plan? It was nothing less than ambitious. Queen Elizabeth was going to sail on the royal yacht Britannia, and this man talked of dropping off some object onto her yacht as it would pass the Golden Gate Bridge. And if he did not succeed, he would attempt to kill her at the Yosemite National Park. And what did the FBI do to prevent this? The Secret Service closed the walkways on the Golden Gate Bridge as the yacht neared. It remains unclear what measures were taken at the Yosemite National Park. Queen Elizabeth's visit went ahead as planned. The FBI has not published if any arrests were made. The documents revealed more similar incidents, by the way. In 1976, Queen Elizabeth was in New York City for America's bicentennial celebrations. That's when a pilot was summoned to fly a small plane over Battery Park. It was supposed to carry a sign that read, "England, get out of Ireland." The FBI remained vigilant to more such threats. Ahead of the late Queen's personal visit to Kentucky in 1989, Boston and New York were asked to be on high alert. An internal FBI memo read, and I'm quoting, "The possibility of threats against the British monarchy is ever present from the Irish Republican Army." You see, many of the late Queen's visits came when Ireland reeled with troubles. The Queen's second cousin, Lord Mountbatten, was killed in an IRA bombing in Ireland in the year 1979. Queen Elizabeth, too, remained at high risk. In fact, in 1991, she was again on a state visit to the US. She was set to see a Baltimore Orioles baseball game with President George Bush. The FBI again warned the Secret Service. It revealed that Irish groups were planning protests at the stadium, and they had reserved a large block of grandstand tickets. While there were not any safety threats per se, the plan was still inflammatory. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI says there may be additional such records, but it has not set out a timetable for their release. Have you seen the movie Terminator? A man who is half robot and half human. That's the story about him. Now, Elon Musk, in the real world, plans to do something similar. And America's FDA has given the go-ahead for Neuralink tech to have human trials. Trials where microchips will be implanted in the brain to treat health conditions. Musk says this will ease concerns of AI taking over humanity. But will the human trials fail like SpaceX Starship? Will Neuralink give people a superior IQ? What lies ahead? What are the risks and the opportunities? Our next report getting you the details.
The brain is a very sensitive organ. A small accident could alter how the whole body functions. Let it be a small bump or a major hit to the skull. You have to be extra careful with the brain. But US's FDA thinks that the insertion of an electronic chip into the brain is safe. Musk's Neuralink has got a green light to conduct human trials. Neuralink is an implant company made to help restore people's vision and mobility. How can it do that? Well, through implanting a chip in the brain, which will connect it to computers. To put it simply, the chip is a super advanced Bluetooth device for disabled people. So, how can it help people with mobility issues? All of it starts with a microchip, which will receive electrical signals from the brain. It will process the signals in real time and send the information to an app on a device via Bluetooth. The device will then perform the task the person wants. For starters, Neuralink hopes to help disabled people use technology. Have the microchips been tested before? Yes, on monkeys. Scientists actually got fabulous results. The monkeys were able to play video games and manipulate cursors. Neuralink's ultimate goal extends beyond helping disabled people. Musk wants to establish dominance over AI. He aims to enhance human intellect through brain-machine interfaces. So, is Musk aiming for smart humans, something similar to smartphones? Reports say US authorities are closely watching the progress. Considering Musk's track, Neuralink has a tagline which promises safety, accessibility, and reliability. Reliability on what? The company's initial aim to start human trials in 2020 failed. It later vowed to start trials in 2022, which also didn't take off. The business was under investigation for alleged animal welfare violations. What kind of violations? Reports say Neuralink has killed over 1,500 animals while testing. Musk made headlines last year. He said he was so sure of the device's safety that he would happily implant a chip in his own children. Has he done that yet? The answer is no. Which brings us to our next question. What are the chances Neuralink will be one of Musk's many successful failures? You know, like the Starship launch. Except this time, Musk won't be experimenting with machines. This time, Musk is looking to get into our brains. Can and should you let him? Musk's recent list of flops don't end with the Starship. Twitter failed the launch of Florida Governor DeSantis' presidential campaign. DeSantis came on Twitter Spaces, a live audio streaming platform, to announce his campaign. A few minutes into the stream, the audio feed faced outages and finally crashed. Will you still take your chances with Musk? Before you do that, we suggest Musk meet an astrologer and fix whatever has jinxed his luck this year.
And our next story is from Ladakh. In a fresh move to boost tourism there, the forbidden zones there will soon welcome tourists. Before we go on, let's just understand the term forbidden zones better. These refer to the areas where entry of tourists and civilians is prohibited. And now, following this move, tourists will be able to cruise their jeeps, they will be able to launch biking blitz and go on their dream treks. Not just that, this will also, of course, boost the revenue in the region, which, by the way, is of importance because more than half the population of Ladakh is dependent on tourism. It is one of the major sources of income for the inhabitants. However, the question that arises is, why were these areas previously forbidden and which are these areas really? The forbidden zones are in the Chang Chenmo sector in eastern Ladakh, close to patrolling points to the north of Pangong Lake, which is, of course, breathtakingly beautiful and happens to be the world's highest saltwater lake. This region of Ladakh has faced a border standoff with China for years. Because of this, it has been out of bounds for visitors. But now Ladakh administration wants to open it up for tourism, which is also in line with the centre's focus on border area development and has been a long pending demand of the locals as well. In its first phase, tourists will be allowed across Marsamik La Pass up to Sogslau. It is located at a height of over 18,000 feet and lies near two rivers around 160 kilometers east of Leh. And in the second phase, tourists will be allowed to travel up to hot springs further up from Sogsalo. And this area houses a memorial which is dedicated to the 10 Indian CRPF soldiers who were killed when their patrol was attacked by the Chinese. And after the completion of both the phases, the new tourism frontier will thus widen the tourism horizons of Ladakh. And for this, the Border Roads Organization has been roped in and the civil development planning of the region has already started. Medical centers, sanitation facilities, even selfie centers for tourists are already in the making. The police is also ready to set up checkpoints and locals are eagerly waiting for this frontier to open. In the year 2011, Syrians took to the streets. They were angry. They protested against their president, Bashar al-Assad. A full-scale civil war followed. 12 years on, with 500,000 people dead, cities devastated, and other countries dragged into the conflict, stories of suffering continue to trickle in. About the lives lost, about the absolute levels of despair, about loved ones separated, about mothers who can no longer cradle their babies. Just put yourself in their shoes for a few minutes. How would you feel if you were a mother in a refugee camp who does not know where the next meal will come from, if at all? There is not enough to go by, not even to feed your little one. Sounds painful, doesn't it? That is what's happening right now in Syria, where mothers are being forced to abandon their babies. Babies are being left outside mosques, hospitals, even under trees. Have a look at these figures. Between early 2021 and late 2022, more than 100 children were found abandoned. 62 of them were girls. 53 abandoned newborns were registered in government-controlled areas in the first 10 months of 2022 alone. Out of this, 28 were boys, 25 were girls. And such cases were rarely seen before. But since the war broke out, the figures have increased dramatically. But numbers, after all, are just numbers. Today, we put a face on them. This is Hibatullah. She was abandoned by her mother in front of a mosque. One cold winter evening, Ibrahim Othman was headed to that same mosque and he found the baby on the ground, abandoned, moving her legs like she did not have a care in the world. Othman and his wife took her in. Listen to their story.
I decided to raise her for God because she came from God. What's her guilt? Today this baby is more precious than my own children. She has lived with us since she was 2 hours old. She's part of the family, even if she's spoiled a bit more than the other children.
But you see, not all babies are as lucky as Hibatullah. Many never see the light of the day. Others fall victim to human trafficking, and only a few are saved by rescue centers. But they rarely find the love of a family because adoption is forbidden across Syria. What is their crime? Why do they have to suffer like this? They are victims of the civil war, so are their mothers. There is poverty, there is instability, insecurity to say the least. Many such babies are born out of wedlock. Many are the result of child marriage or sex abuse. Syrians are trying to cope with this. The government is setting up dedicated facilities for abandoned children. And what happens at these centers? Let's just take you inside one. In rebel-held Idlib province, social workers tend to tiny babies wrapped in blankets. This center has taken in 26 babies since it opened in the year 2019. 9 were taken in this year alone. One baby girl they took in was found under an olive tree. This is disturbing, but you should know this. The baby was mauled by a cat. Her face was dripping with blood when the workers found her. Listen to what her nanny had to say.
My relationship with the children is like that of a mother or a grandmother because I'm in my 50s. I watch over them. It's tiring, but it's also beautiful because you feel like you're raising a soul with whom you've been entrusted. You have to look after her more than you would your own son. Why? Because it's a responsibility before God. It's our job.
And this is what more than a decade of a war does to a country. Leaders of countries sit in their offices and give out their orders, but those who are suffering ultimately are the people on the ground. Babies like Hibatullah and mothers who are forced to leave their innocent kids behind. Shifting focus for now, I have a question for you. How much do you value your privacy? Also, how would you feel if intricate details of your life were written out in a book out there for everyone to read? I hope you agree with me when I say it would make you feel uncomfortable, to say the least. Well, this has actually happened with the French Prime Minister. That's right. The French publishing house La Chapelle released Elizabeth Borne's biography. It was written by journalist Bérengère Bonte. The biography was sold out the moment it hit the bookshelves. But Borne is not happy. In fact, she has sued the publisher. Here's why. The book is titled La Secret, which means the secretive one. The book talks about Borne's father's suicide, who was a Holocaust survivor. It also described Borne as a workaholic who was prone to outbursts, who lost weight under work stress. A woman's weight, after all, has been a public matter for a long time now. And it's as if that was not enough. The author also questioned Borne's sexual orientation. She mentioned rumors about being a lesbian, also claimed that her male partner was just a cover to fool the press. Borne has had enough. She said, and I'm quoting, "When a journalist describes in detail the conditions of my father's suicide, when she has intrusive comments about my intimate life, my relationship with my son, my ex-husband, when she spreads allegations on my health or sexual orientation, how can she pretend that was done with my consent?" At some point, one just wants to say, enough is enough. And what did the author have to say in her defense? Well, you would be surprised. She said, and I'm quoting, "She arrived in the Prime Minister's office and nobody knew her. So much the better if people discover who she is thanks to this." Bonte is proud of her work. She thinks she has done Borne a favor. But my question here is, why question someone's sexuality? Borne has time and again refused to identify as a lesbian. So what really is this author's agenda here? Do we just go around pointing fingers at politicians, assuming their sexual orientation? And how often does this happen with male politicians? It's true that being a public figure comes at a cost. There is speculation about their public life, but why are women targeted more than men? And is it really okay to infringe into the private lives of women politicians? Now that Borne has taken action against it, she is being accused of censorship. Why? Does she not have a say in this? Isn't this about her life, her private matters after all? And you see, it's about Elizabeth Borne today. A few months ago, it was Sanna Marin. Remember, she was partying with her friends, but people hounded her into taking a drug test, which, by the way, came out to be negative. Did anyone even flinch when Justin Trudeau sipped beers with Obama? No, they did not. Because you see, what men do can always be signed off as boys being boys. And women, sadly, do not enjoy that privilege. People talk about what's happening in their bedrooms, about their partners, their family members, even their sexuality. And these are women in power we are talking about. But they are rendered powerless, you see, in the public eye. On to Cambodia now. An incident that took place there has been making global headlines. Why? Because of its very nature. 40 crocodiles tore a man to pieces. You heard that right. This happened when the person tried to move a crocodile out of a cage. Our next report getting you the complete story.
A horrible crocodile attack has taken place in Cambodia. A man has been mauled by 40 crocodiles. Yes, you heard that right. A group of 40 crocodiles tore a man apart. So, how did this happen? 72-year-old Luan Man was moving a croc out of a cage. The crocodile had laid eggs which needed to be taken care of. Luan was using a stick to protect himself, but it turned out to be counterproductive. The croc grabbed the stick and pulled him into the enclosure. Then there was no looking back. 40 crocs attacked him until the enclosure was awash with blood. One of his arms were bitten off and swallowed by the reptiles. Luan Man was the president of the Crocodile Farmers Association. His family always urged him to stop raising the reptiles. This is not the only attack in a reptile farm. In 2019, a 2-year-old girl wandered into her family's reptile farm. She was killed and eaten by the crocs. Earlier this month in Australia, remains of a missing fisherman were found inside 2 crocodiles. Did the crocs soiree into the fisherman's space? Was it the other way around? The animals are getting back at humans for infringing. Are animals getting back at humans for infringing their homes? In the Turks and Caicos Islands, a woman was attacked by a shark while snorkeling. The 22-year-old had a leg bitten off in the attack. Here's another incident. A group of killer whales damaged a boat, which soon sank. Studies show that there have been 505 orca attacks since 2020. Scientists haven't been able to explain such behavior. Could this be a sign for humans to back away from dominating the seas? Have animals had enough of their territory being invaded? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
How far will you go to stay young? And how important is it for you to stay young? You see, being young could mean different things to different people. Some would say age is just a number. You have to stay young at heart and in your mind, so on and so forth. But then there are some who believe that feeling young means looking young. You could be investing in products to look younger. And then there are some who could go to any length to stay young, no matter how extreme or out of the world the route might be. This is the story of an entrepreneur. His name is Brian Johnson. He is 45 years old and has undertaken a therapy of a different kind, a plasma therapy, where his son's blood plasma was injected into his bloodstream. Why is that? Well, you see, he's been wanting to have a body of a teenager. He had a lot of money, but he was not happy. And he wanted to look young. And he made his physical health his prime focus. He established a biotech company, in fact, named Kernel. It made helmets to measure brain activity, basically to figure out the impact of meditation, also the effect of drug therapies. There was also Project Blueprint, as a part of which he serves as the guinea pig for experimental therapies. What kind of therapies, you wonder? And what was the aim? Simply put, to slow down or even reverse the aging process. This blood plasma therapy is part of the mission to show how a middle-aged man can have the body of an 18-year-old. And there have been multiple plasma infusions that Johnson has received, by the way, usually from healthy and young anonymous donors. In fact, with Brian Johnson's father, Richard Johnson, who is 70 years old, receiving some of his plasma, this was a tri-generational transfer. Clinicians drew a liter of blood from Johnson, his father, and his son. The aim, basically, is to turn back the clock, travel back in time. But is that even possible? Well, Johnson would be releasing the results of the plasma therapy, so we will be finding out soon enough. And our last story tonight is about a 12th class topper. It's not a story about his mark sheet or, for that matter, about his perseverance. The story is about his belief in himself. Meet Subhrangshu Sardar. He is a class 12 student. He bagged the top spot in the West Bengal both school leaving exams with an impressive 99.2%. He scored 496 out of 500 marks. And when the results were announced, reporters rushed to his residence. They placed a mic in front of him and asked the obvious question: what was the secret to his success? Whom do you give credit? But to everyone's surprise, he did not give out the same old answer. My parents, my teachers, so on and so forth, Instead, he credited himself for his success. Let me just quote what he said exactly. I feel that I have contributed the most to my success because I took the exam. Subhrangshu's response amused many on social media. Well, he is brutally honest, they said. Many called him straightforward and witty. And we think he has food for thought for all of us. Why don't we give ourselves enough credit? When we do well in exams, we thank our teachers first, parents next, or the other way around. When we are awarded at work, we thank our manager, our mentors. When an actor wins an award, wins an Oscar, she thanks her colleagues, her family members. You get what I'm trying to say here? And just for the record, by the way, there is nothing wrong in extending gratitude, of course. You should. And you should not waste an opportunity to thank those who have helped you reach where you have, helped you in your journey. But my point is, don't forget to thank yourself first. Take a moment to give yourself the credit for burning the midnight oil, for swimming the final lap even when your lungs begged you to give up, for sprinting the final 100 meters with a burning heart and numb legs. Give yourself the due credit for staying back home and studying when all your friends went on that trip you so badly wanted to go for as well. For resisting that ice cream, sticking to your routine, so on and so forth. So the next time you achieve a milestone, don't forget to credit yourself for working on weekends, even when you could very well have not done that. Don't forget your hard work, your sacrifices. And of course, don't forget to applaud yourself. It's not at the cost of others. You see, Subhrangshu did not forget the people who contributed to his success. He, of course, remembered them. He did go on to thank his school, his parents. The only difference is he placed himself first. It's not being selfish or self-centered. It's about giving credit where it is due, which is to yourself. And with that, we leave you with some food for thought. Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
At least 33 people suspected of attacking army installations during protests that followed the arrest of Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan earlier this month have been handed over to the military for trials. The Turkish lira weakens to a record low of 20 against the dollar, ahead of this weekend's presidential election runoff, which will decide if President Erdogan extends his rule into a third decade. Pope Francis did not receive anyone in audiences on Friday because he has a fever, says the Vatican, without providing any further details on the health of the 86-year-old Roman Catholic leader. Japan announces new sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, targeting its military as well as businesses. The asset freeze targets 17 individuals and 78 organizations, including high-level military officials. Japanese police have arrested a 31-year-old after 4 people were killed in a rare shooting and stabbing incident involving a 12-hour standoff with police. The suspect is the son of Nakano City Council's head. For the 5th straight year, India is likely to receive formal monsoon rains in 2023, despite the likely emergence of the El Niño weather phenomenon, according to the Weather Office. The Rincon de la Vieja volcano in northern Costa Rica registered a powerful eruption. No one was injured and no infrastructure was damaged, according to Costa Rican authorities. Economists say Singapore faces a high risk of slipping into a technical recession in the second quarter as challenges in the external environment persist. Manchester United beat Chelsea 4-1 at Old Trafford to guarantee a top 4 finish in the English Premier League. That win also seals a Champions League return for the Red Devils. Casemiro, Anthony Martial, Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford all found the back of the net in the thrashing. Boston Celtics beat Miami Heat 110-97 in Game 5 to stay alive in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. Last season's runners-up won a second straight game to force Game 6 in Miami.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas tonight. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend.